Charlie Kirk was shot dead, and when he was talking at the university campus in Utah, if I'm not mistaken, talking to audience, and the president of the United States came out and put the blame on the far left. And what's going on in the United States today, in your opinion, that they try to picture what's going on, the violence, and put it the blame on the left, right, and whatever?
My take on that is that the fundamental difficulty of the United States today is a declining capitalist system. The empire is in tatters, it barely exists. The domestic economy, Jamie Dimon, the head of the largest bank in the United States, gave an interview, actually two or three of them, and talked about the weakening U.S. economy. Now, he always talks as if he were a spectator rather than one of the people responsible for it. That's cute. Hopefully nobody's fooled. But there he is, admitting what the others are afraid to admit, but pretending he's a spectator. Well, Mr. Trump pretends in a different way, but is dealing with the same weakening economy and the same vanishing empire and the same hobbled capitalism. But Mr. Trump's specialty, and that goes back to the first time he became a serious public figure, if you remember, riding down that escalator somewhere in New York City and explaining to the world that the problems we face are about Mexican immigrants, whom he then slandered. Mr. Trump specializes, as leaders often do in declining empires, in finding scapegoats. Mexicans are scapegoats. The Chinese are scapegoats. And the American left, that he understands as well as he understands everything else, namely not at all, is likewise now going to be a scapegoat. When you can't fix a problem, you blame somebody for it to detract from your failure to fix it. Mr. Trump told us he was going to end the war in Ukraine in a matter of days or weeks. False. He was going to end the war in Gaza in a short time. False. He's actually gone to war in Iran, a war that wasn't there when he became president, and he's gearing up, evidently, to do the same to Venezuela. The man is finding people around the world to blame. I want to remind people, it's a parallel I would take seriously. Germany, in the years before Hitler, faced the loss of its empire. That was accomplished in World War I, when literally the German Empire in Africa, Asia, was taken away by the winning side of World War I, so the Germans lost their empire. In 1923, they had the worst inflation in modern history that wiped out their entire middle class. All their savings accumulated over the 19th century were lost. And it ended up by the end of 1923, all those savings were barely enough to get you a quarter pound of butter at the local store. And then in 1929, as we all know, the Great Depression hit. So in a very few years, 1918 to 1933, or 1929 if you like, the German working class was really whacked. And in desperation, they turned to a leader who promised them, I'll fix it right away, and here are the scapegoats. Jews, Roma people, Slavic people, all the collection of scapegoats Mr. Hitler specialized in. And then he went to war in order to distract the people from what was happening at home so they could focus on the glorious victories being achieved abroad. If it sounds familiar, it should. And if you think that I'm telling you a story that gets you depressed, don't be. Today's headlines are full of what the French people just did, saying, we're not going to tolerate this. And in Nepal, halfway across the world, another group, another people are rising up and saying no. The important question, is not that Mr. Trump has found the left to scapegoat, that he wants to turn a killing in Utah into something more he can say. Arresting somebody of Mexican descent in order to slander Mexico as a whole. Cheap shot. We all kind of know better. But yeah, he'll try. And you know what that shows? Desperation is what it shows. And that desperation is first and foremost economic. We're facing a risk of inflation. We're facing the risk of a recession. Our foreign connections are falling apart. The rest of the world is mobilizing to go around us, to isolate us. That's the reality. Meanwhile, the inequality in wealth and income gets worse and worse. And we just had a spectacle in which the board of directors of a typical American mega capitalist company, Tesla, offers its own CEO a pay package over the next few years worth $1 trillion. That's the achievement of capitalism, to make the already richest person even richer than he has been up until now. It is obscene and it will not last.
Well, Richard is quite right in pointing to the weakening of the U.S. economy and to the desperation that is guiding Trump's domestic policy. But I think that his dream that somehow you can reverse America's deindustrialization involves subordinating its allies and turning them into subsidiaries of a shrinking U.S. West. Richard quite rightly points to the fact that, well, the rest of the world is appalled by this. The rest of the world, meaning the SCO, the BRICS, Russia, China, the East Asia, the successful economies that continue to grow. But I think that Trump has a proactive, not Trump, I should say the deep state, of which Trump is simply acting as the front man, has a proactive response to all of this. And he says, well, I've applied my tariffs and to threaten to cause chaos to other countries if they don't support and subsidize the United States economy. The threats of tariffs and the sanctions didn't work against Russia, didn't work against Iran. China is too independent for it to work then. So we're not going to try to spend and dissipate any more U.S. wealth fighting Russia, at least Russia, and even trying to increase the Cold War. What we can do is consolidate our control over the Western economies, and if American firms won't reindustrialize, we can tell Europe, Korea, and Japan to dismantle their own industry and relocate their industry in the United States, and they will reindustrialize the United States. I think that what you can think of what the U.S. is trying to do in response to its decline is to imitate what the British Empire did in the 19th century. It's treating its allies as colonies, just like Britain treated India and other countries, to sort of say, keep your savings in pound sterling, keep your savings in Britain, don't industrialize yourself, but become dependent on American industry. What makes Trump realize that there has to be a shift is there isn't American industry for them to become dependent on. So he's told the European industry, especially the Germans, to relocate in the United States, to tell Korea that, well, if you want to make money and profit selling cars, relocate Hyundai's production in the United States, and to tell Japan you can avoid the disruption of imposing heavy tariffs on you by lending the United States $500 billion by the time my 4-year presidency is up. And you will give us $1 trillion. You will have no control over this. I will have total personal control over what's going to happen. And after we make investments and you will be repaid your $500 billion, America will have 90% of the profits from your investment here. Not 50%, as the Japanese press originally reported, but only 10%. Well, none of the details of this agreement with Japan have been released yet, but the Financial Times today had just a wonderful discussion saying how horrendous the agreement with Japan is. And the Financial Times reporter leaked it all and reported a glowing Lutnick, who, the American negotiator, appeared on CNBC and said, this is the most fun he's had working for this period, and Trump has complete discussion. And the Financial Times describes this secret agreement that has not yet been made public by Japan, because you can imagine what the Japanese public would feel if this agreement were made public. And the Financial Times said this, quotes, reeks of coercion, a sovereign nation forced to funnel private and public sector investment to a much richer one under the structures unashamedly directed by the U.S. president. Well, you can see the problems, and the most abject surrender has been that of Germany and Europe, and there's been hardly any coverage in the U.S. press of the bait and switch that America had with von der Leyen said, we will do whatever you want, President Trump, as long as you give us security and at least we know what's going to happen so that you will protect us from Russia invading us. What happened was there's no security at all. Trump agreed not to impose punitive tariffs on Europe, but all of a sudden he changed his mind. And instead of the lowering the tariffs from 25% for 15%, he said, well, we're still going to keep the tariffs we have, 50% on steel and aluminum. And if it happens that any of your manufacturers contain steel or aluminum, up to 50%. Well, this is treating Europe just like industry. Well, there's been a cry out of the European industrialists saying, wait a minute, if when we do make a manufactured good, it does include steel and aluminum, and we're going to have to close down our operations. Well, Trump says, well, there is a solution. You can avoid the tariffs by relocating in the United States and doing the kind of deal that Hyundai has done in the United States, that Japan has done. This is a shakedown, pure and simple, and you can see what is happening. The SCO and the BRICS are seeing that it's so fortunate that they didn't even try to engage with negotiations with tariff. They just, with Trump, go your own way. And you're seeing the world really dividing into what the United States can retain from the countries it defeated in World War II, Germany and Japan and the Korean War in 1951. They all have the Stockholm Syndrome among their leaders. They somehow identify with the victor, and the United States has been able to carve them out. And that's the proactive response to all this. And none of this has to do with what you'd call the left. We're talking about national interests, but I'm sure that Trump will accuse foreign opponents of saying, wait a minute, we want Japan to have the profits from its investments. We want Korea to be able to bring our skilled labor over when the United States does not have contractors that can build the Hyundai factory. And the Germans who say, well, we can't just relocate to the United States. It takes years to build a factory. We'll go bankrupt in the process. This is Trump's response to the world. And I think that goes beyond anything that the left or even the right had even dreamed of a year ago before Trump won.
Let me intervene, and perhaps here I will disagree just a bit with Michael, but maybe not. Yeah, time will for sure tell whether a return of big business from the rest of the world moving its production to the United States is a serious phenomenon. So far, we only have words. We have promises. We have all of this, and as I have known, and as Michael knows, and as most of the people who follow this thing, it's real easy for a prime minister or a big corporation to tell you about the enormous investments they're planning to make next year, 3 years from now, and 5 years. Most of the executives in top positions who make those promises won't be in those positions 3 years from now, when those promises will likely be forgotten or excused, number one. Number two, the deal of the United States is not, the problem of the United States is it's not in a position to get the lackeys it's had since the end of World War II, Western Europe, Japan, and so on, to do what it needs to have them do. Michael is right. They should all now become colonies. And colonies, let me explain. Colonies in the following precise sense. They are being charged to do business in the United States. You want to sell in the United States, you're going to have to work out with the importing company. If you yourself don't import into the United States, you're going to have to pay a fee. It's an entrance fee to the American economy. That's what a tariff is. If you sell in the American economy, you're going to have to pay the American government a fee. And the American government is so desperate, it says either you pay it, the company abroad coming in, or the American importer pays it. We don't care. We are equally burdening you and the American. That's not something the American government wants to do. It wants others to pay, but it can't get that. So it has to do a deal which hurts its own so-called program. Why in the world would you come here if one of the things you're going to have to do as a business is pay real high tariffs, which could be raised at any time, on the imported portion of whatever it is you produce here, which, at least for the years ahead, is going to be significant. No, I think what I see is a declining empire, no longer able to control huge parts of the world, China, India, Russia, BRICS, and therefore having to eat its own colonies, to savage Canada and Mexico, its major trading partners, doing God knows what kind of damage to those societies. And I want to be clear, the United States may get von der Leyen or Merz or the Japanese leaders secretly to give away their country's needs. But the only way to sustain that, the only way possible for them to stay in office is to hype a great danger. That's the hysteria over Russian invasions, which you can see ratcheted up 6 more notches when some drones go flying over Poland. You can see the hysteria working its way up. This is a very useful hysteria, focusing the blame on Russia when your problem is the United States. But you can't say that because they can really hurt you, which the Russians can't. The Russians are having trouble subduing Ukraine. They're going to go after the rest of Europe? That's a joke. Nobody in their right mind, except if you're desperate, if you need a scapegoat. And what's the scapegoat in Europe for, the scapegoating of Russia? They are in a position in which to salvage anything in their economy, they have to come up with a whole new programming, here we go, of subsidizing their own industries. That's part of how they will react and are reacting against the United States, whatever they say publicly. The Europeans know what is being done to them. They don't want it. They are afraid that if they are hollowed out of their industry, their own people will turn against them. And you can see it already in the streets of France, in the right-wing shift of the German political scene, the British political, Farage in England, Alternative für Deutschland in Germany, and so on. It's not working real well. The Americans are desperate and are taking care of themselves. They hope to do that at the expense of their used-to-be allies / colonies. So they squeeze the crap out of them, who in turn demonize Russia to justify the military buildup which will be the mask for subsidizing their own industry at the expense of their social democracy welfare states. That's what's happening. And I don't think that's going to work. And that's Mr. Trump's worst nightmare, that all of this scapegoating will not work. And here's a last point. A friend of mine is an industrialist in Europe. I can assure you, he understands perfectly what's going on. And in my latest conversation with him, where I said, is there any way that you might actually move your production to the United States? He said laughingly, are you crazy? And I said, well, why? He said, every day in our newspaper in the country in Europe, Western Europe, where he lives, we see pictures of American troops patrolling American cities. You're a country that I wouldn't move to in a million years. There's too much turmoil. And then I watched your new army, your ICE army, closing down a South Korean battery plant in Georgia out of the hysteria you have cultivated against immigrants. I'm not moving there. I'm not entering that crazy place that is occupying its own cities. I want to quote to you finally a statement made by Vice President Vance yesterday. In commenting on the occupation that's supposed to end, although I gather it isn't, in Washington, D.C. by federal troops, the vice president said with great enjoyment that his fondest hope is to see that done in cities across America. That's what he said. I mean, I don't have the exact words, but that is the exact quotation. He is into, foreign industrialists say, that's not a place I want to go to. Given everything else happening in the world, I'm not moving to a place that looks like it is falling apart. And with the shooting of that right-wing fellow yesterday, you can see where this is going. Of course he's right. What am I going to tell him? Oh, you don't have to worry about violence in the United States, about situations like the South Korean battery plant. This is crazy stuff. And we are in a country that is falling apart. And all the pretense of its scapegoating this one, that one, shooting from the hip before you know anything. They don't even know who did the thing in Utah, let alone what the motivations might be. Nor will it be believable once they do. We can't believe anything anymore. Michael and I used to use the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In the last 3 weeks, we have had 2 demonstrations. The president fires the woman who runs it, and the next person in charge explains that for the last year, we have overestimated the number of jobs in this country by 1 million. I mean, these are all symptoms, folks. You can pretend with this one or that one to dispute it or to quibble about it. But the bottom line is everywhere, the retreat, the desperation, the scapegoating is a substitute for being able to do anything serious about this.
Richard has given what could be a summary of exactly my views by emphasizing the role of scapegoating and the almost parallel universe ability of the U.S. to have been able to support leaders that can insist that Russia actually cares enough about Europe to actually invade it, instead of saying, we don't want anything to do with it. We've turned our eyes east. All we want to do is to be left alone and not harassed. But that's all that the United States can do. And if you look at what Trump also gave a speech yesterday, he said, America will fall apart without the tariffs. We need the tariffs because the tariffs are what's balancing the budget so that we can cut the taxes. He didn't say this, but the implication to finish his sentence is America will fall apart because that we won't have tariffs to enable us to cut the taxes on the wealthiest 10% while we raise taxes on the 90%. It's all about the polarization that Richard talked about earlier. How can America support an economy that remunerates the 10%, including the $1 trillion paycheck to Musk, without getting the money from its colonies, its de facto colonies, in the countries that it's defeated in World War II and in Korea? So what Trump followed up was to say, well, who's opposing this? If you oppose the tariffs, that's the left. Well, of course, the left doesn't want to see the polarization between the wealthiest stockholders and bondholders whose wealth is increasing, while the net worth of 90% of the population is actually going down. And when you get to the bottom 50%, it's going down pretty rapidly.